Tomatoes are so familiar. Whether you're walking through a backyard garden or standing in front of the produce section at a supermarket. Out of habit, many people reach for the reddest tomato, the biggest tomato, or the one with the smoothest, tightest skin, thinking it must be the best tasting one. That experience isn't wrong, but it only answers one very general question. Does this tomato look good? The problem is, tomatoes are not always chosen for the same purpose. Sometimes you need one to eat right away. Sometimes you want to keep it for a few days. Sometimes you need it for making sauce, taking on a trip, or saving the seeds for next season. And once the purpose changes, the way you choose should change too. Today, we're going to go through 5 ways to choose tomatoes for 5 very different needs. After this video, before you pick a tomato from the garden or put one into your shopping cart, you won't just ask, which tomato looks the best? Instead, you'll ask a much more important question. What do I need this tomato for? The truth is, tomatoes are one of the few fruits that continue to change even after they're picked from the vine. With each passing day, their sugar content, water content, softness, and even aroma can all change. So 2 tomatoes that look almost identical on the outside may not give you the same result once you bring them home and use them. That's also why experienced tomato growers rarely judge a tomato by its color alone. They usually pick it up, look at the stem, feel its weight and firmness, and even smell it before making a decision. And now, let's go through each of those signs, one by one, and see how they match different needs. If your goal is to slice a tomato right away for a salad, a sandwich, or simply to eat it fresh, then you should choose tomatoes that are fully ripe. This is when the sugars, acids, and aroma compounds are at their best balance. So the flavor is usually much richer than tomatoes that are still green or have only recently started changing color. The first thing to check is the color. A good, ripe tomato usually has an even color across almost the entire surface. For common red varieties, such as beefsteak, Better Boy, or Celebrity, the fruit should be deep red over nearly the whole tomato. If you're growing Cherokee Purple, Black Crim, or other purple varieties, the color should lean toward brownish purple or deep reddish purple rather than bright red. Next, bring the tomato close to your nose and smell around the stem. This is a trick that many experienced tomato growers still use. A tomato's aroma comes from dozens of natural aromatic compounds that develop as the fruit ripens. When a tomato reaches good ripeness, those compounds are most concentrated around the stem. If you can barely smell anything, or the aroma is very faint, there's a good chance the flavor inside won't be very impressive, even if the tomato looks beautiful on the outside. Next, check the weight. Try holding 2 tomatoes that are about the same size. The heavier one usually contains more juice and fuller flesh. This is especially noticeable with large tomato varieties like beefsteak. A tomato that feels unusually light may already have started losing moisture, or may have been harvested quite a while ago. Finally, check the firmness. Gently squeeze the shoulder or side of the tomato with your fingers. A tomato that's perfect for eating right away should give slightly under gentle pressure, and then spring back. If it feels almost as hard as an apple, it was probably picked before it was fully ripe, or it still needs a few more days to develop its full flavor. On the other hand, if it sinks in deeply with just a light touch or feels mushy, the tomato is already overripe and won't have much shelf life left. This is also the most common mistake many people make, thinking that the firmer the tomato is, the fresher it must be. In reality, When you're choosing a tomato to eat right away, ripeness is what determines the flavor. A tomato that's slightly soft but still firm will usually be much sweeter, more aromatic, and juicier than one that's still hard, even if the hard one looks perfect. It only takes about 10 to 15 seconds, but these small checks often make a huge difference when you bring tomatoes home to your table. I'll share one more small tip with you. If you observe carefully, you will notice that some tomatoes have a blossom end that is round, even, and nicely closed, while others are slightly pointed, misshapen, or unusually raised. When you see tomatoes with a blossom end that is too pointed, badly misshapen, has star-shaped cracks, or has a soft area around the bottom, along with the fruit being too hard, uneven in color, thick-skinned, or feeling light in your hand, you can skip them. On the other hand, tomatoes with a blossom end that is round even and nicely closed are the ones you should choose for your meal. If you're buying tomatoes not to eat today but to use over the next several days, don't rush to pick the ripest tomato in the basket. This is a very common mistake. Many people assume that the reddest, softest, and most fragrant tomato is automatically the best one to buy. But once you bring it home and leave it on the kitchen counter, it often starts softening quickly after just 2 or 3 days. By the 5th day, the skin may begin to wrinkle, develop small cracks, or show bruises. If you leave it for a week, many tomatoes are no longer at their best to eat. When your goal is storage, the tomato you want is not the one at peak flavor, but one that is still on its way to ripening. Choose tomatoes that are about 30 to 60% through the color-changing stage, meaning they've gone from light green to yellow-orange, light pink, or light red, depending on the variety. In the United States, this stage is commonly called the breaker stage or turning stage. Simply put, this is when the tomato has started to ripen, but is still firm enough to continue developing flavor after being picked. The first sign is that the tomato is not fully red yet. For red varieties such as Roma, Celebrity, and Better Boy, you can choose fruits that are just starting to blush or are about half red. For cherry tomatoes such as Cherry, Sweet 100, and Sun Gold, the fruit should be close to its mature color, but still feel firm in your hand. For yellow or orange varieties, don't wait until the fruit becomes too soft. Choose it when the color has developed clearly, but the skin is still tight. Next, check the firmness. Tomatoes meant for storage should be firmer than tomatoes meant to eat right away. When you gently squeeze one, it should give only slightly, not sink in deeply. If the stem is still green, fresh, and not dry or brittle, that's even better, because it's usually a sign that the tomato hasn't been sitting around too long after harvest. Another thing to check is the aroma. Tomatoes that are ready to eat usually have a noticeable smell around the stem. But tomatoes meant for storage don't need to be highly fragrant at the time you buy them. Once you bring them home, keep the tomatoes at room temperature, ideally around 60 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Place them in a well-ventilated area, away from direct sunlight, and avoid stacking them too high because the weight can bruise the tomatoes underneath. If you want them to ripen more evenly, place them with the stem side facing down to reduce moisture loss around the stem area. Don't put tomatoes into the refrigerator while they are still ripening. Cold temperatures can slow the ripening process and reduce their flavor. Only after the tomatoes are fully ripe and you're not ready to use them should you place them in the refrigerator to extend their shelf life for a few more days. If you want tomatoes to last longer, choose fruits that have just started changing color, are still slightly firm, have fresh stems, and are not overly fragrant yet. If you plan to save seeds for next season, this is one tip that many new gardeners often overlook. Most people think it's enough to simply choose the biggest, best-looking tomato and save the seeds. But in reality, the most important factor isn't the fruit. It's the plant that produced it. Imagine you have 10 tomato plants of the same variety in your garden. Some plants grow vigorously, keep healthy green leaves throughout the season, have very few pest or disease problems, and produce fruit consistently. Others frequently develop leaf spots, wilt, or produce much lower yields. If both plants produce an equally beautiful tomato, an experienced gardener will almost always save seeds from the healthier plant. The reason is simple. You're choosing the parent plant for next season. So, always give priority to plants that grow well, stay healthy, and produce consistent yields. Then choose the fruit. The tomato you save seeds from should also be allowed to ripen completely on the vine. Don't pick it while it's still green and let it ripen indoors. Although the flesh may still turn red, the seeds inside may not have fully matured. Ideally, choose a tomato that has reached the characteristic color of its variety, feels slightly soft, and if the weather is favorable, leave it on the vine for a few extra days after it ripens so the seeds can mature more completely. Another important thing to remember is that not every tomato variety is suitable for seed saving. If you're growing open-pollinated varieties, the seeds you collect will usually produce plants that are very similar to the parent plant. Heirloom varieties such as Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, and San Marzano also belong to this group, which is why they're so popular among gardeners who want to save seeds year after year. On the other hand, if you're growing hybrid F1 varieties such as Better Boy, Big Beef, or Early Girl, you can still save the seeds and they can still germinate. However, the plants you grow next season may no longer keep the original characteristics. The fruits may be smaller, yields may decrease, or the flavor may change because hybrid traits are no longer stable. So, if your goal is to maintain the same tomato variety over many years, remember two very simple rules. Choose seeds from the healthiest plant first, then choose the fruit, and whenever possible, choose open-pollinated or heirloom varieties instead of hybrid F1. If your goal is to make sauce, dry tomatoes, or can them, then the selection criteria will be completely different from choosing tomatoes to eat fresh. The most common mistake is choosing juicy tomatoes because people think they will taste better. In reality, what you need is a tomato with more flesh and less water. Tomatoes can be divided into three easy-to-remember groups. First is the salad tomato group, including varieties like Beefsteak, Better Boy, and Celebrity. They have large fruits, lots of water, many seed chambers, and are very suitable for eating fresh, making salad, or using in sandwiches. The second group is Roma, a familiar tomato variety for sauces. The fruits are smaller, elongated, with thicker flesh and less water. Finally, there is the paste tomato group, used mainly for processing, with well-known varieties such as San Marzano, AMISH paste, and Opalka. What they have in common is more flesh, fewer seeds, and very little free water. When choosing tomatoes, pay attention to three signs. First, the fruit often feels firm and heavy in your hand, not soft and juicy like fresh-eating tomatoes. Second, when you cut it open, it will have fewer seed chambers. And finally, thick, dense flesh is the factor that determines the quality of the sauce. The benefit of choosing the right variety becomes clear as soon as you start cooking. Because there is less water, you will spend less time reducing it. The sauce will thicken faster, and you will also get more finished product. The flavor is richer because you do not have to simmer it too long to evaporate the excess water. The same is true if you dry or can them. Fleshy tomatoes hold their shape better, shrink less, and have a deeper flavor after processing. So, if your goal is making sauce, drying, or preserving, prioritize Roma, San Marzano, or Amish paste. They may not be the prettiest or juiciest tomatoes on the stand, but they are varieties made almost specifically for processing. If you are buying tomatoes to bring to a relative's house, take to a party, or simply need to travel for a few hours before using them, then the selection criteria will be different from eating them right away at home. At this point, a good-tasting tomato alone is not enough. What matters more is that it can keep its shape, freshness, and quality throughout the trip. That is why sellers at farmers markets or people harvesting tomatoes to sell usually do not only look at whether the tomato is red, big, or beautiful. They check the skin, firmness, and the entire surface very carefully, because even one small weak spot can make the fruit spoil faster after a few hours of travel. The first thing to observe is the skin. A tomato with tight, smooth, and intact skin will handle bumps much better than one with scratches or small cracks. Especially, do not underestimate tiny cracks around the stem or on the bottom of the fruit. If you eat it right away, they may barely affect the flavor. But if the tomato has to sit in a shopping bag, in a car, or in a box for a few hours, those cracks will be the first weak points. Cracks do not only make the tomato bruise more easily, they also let the water inside escape faster. Once the skin is damaged, the fruit also becomes softer more easily, leaks juice more easily, and develops dark bruised areas faster than a tomato with intact skin. The next factor is ripeness. Do not choose a tomato that is already soft, like one meant for eating right away. Choose one that is just ripe, still firm. When gently squeezed, it should only sink in slightly, and then spring back. This firmness helps the tomato handle shaking and bumps better during transport, especially when you have to travel by car or pack it with many other items. One thing many people overlook is that they only look at the top of the tomato, where the stem is, and then decide to buy it. But professional sellers often pick up the fruit and check the bottom as well. The reason is that the bottom of the tomato is often where problems appear first, and you cannot see them when the fruit is still sitting in the tray. Look for signs such as star-shaped cracks, soft areas, bruises, or unusual spots. It only takes a few seconds to turn the tomato over and check, but it can help you avoid buying tomatoes that look beautiful on the outside while the bottom has already started to go bad. If you are buying a large amount, you should also pay attention to how the tomatoes are stacked. The tomatoes at the bottom of a box or tray often carry more pressure, so they are easier to bruise even if it is not clearly visible yet. When you bring them home or take them far away, it is best to arrange the tomatoes in a single layer if possible, or use a shallow box instead of packing them too tightly in a bag. In short, if you are buying tomatoes for transport or as a gift, prioritize 3 things: intact skin, firm fruit, and no cracks or bruises, even on the bottom. A beautiful tomato is not always the most durable one, and just a few seconds of careful checking can help you keep its quality until you use it. There is no one perfect tomato for every purpose. There is only the tomato that best fits what you are about to do. So before you pick a tomato in the garden or put one into your shopping cart, ask yourself, what am I going to use this tomato for? If you are eating it right away, prioritize a ripe, fragrant tomato that feels heavy and slightly springy. If you want to keep it for a few days, choose one that has just started changing color, is still firm, and is not too fragrant yet. If you want to save seeds, look at the parent plant first, then choose a tomato that has fully ripened on the vine. If you are making sauce, drying, or canning, choose meaty, low-water varieties like Roma, San Marzano, or Amish paste. And if you are taking tomatoes far away, or giving them as a gift, choose fruit with intact skin, firm texture, and remember to check the bottom as well. Just by changing the question from "which tomato looks the best" to "which tomato fits my need," you will choose tomatoes much more wisely.